The elevator ride to the 40th floor of Mitchell & Sons Corporation felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the weight of the acquisition documents in my briefcase. Or maybe it was knowing that in exactly 47 minutes, I would watch my family's carefully constructed world implode. My brother Marcus's voice echoed from my last family dinner 3 months ago. Still working at that tiny office downtown? What happened to all those fancy degrees, little sister? Mom had chimed in with her usual disapproval. Such a waste of potential. We gave you every opportunity, Rachel, and you end up pushing papers at some no-name company. If they'd bothered to Google Reynolds Global Ventures, they might have discovered it wasn't so no-name after all. But that would have required actual interest in my life. The elevator doors opened to the familiar sight of Mitchell & Sons' executive floor. Karen, my father's longtime secretary, barely glanced up as I approached. "The board meeting is private," she said dismissively. "If you're looking for Marcus, he's busy preparing his CEO acceptance speech." Of course he was. Today was supposed to be his crowning achievement. Dad stepping down, passing the family company to his only son. The fact that Marcus had nearly run the European division into the ground was apparently irrelevant. "Actually," I smiled, sliding my ID across her desk, "I'm here for the board meeting. Reynolds Global Ventures representative." Her eyes widened as she read the name, Rachel Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. "Impossible," she whispered. "You work at some small." "The tiny office downtown is just our local branch," I explained. "Our headquarters takes up 3 buildings in Manhattan." But my family never asked about that. The boardroom doors were already open, executives filing in for the 10 a.m. meeting. I caught glimpses of familiar faces, Dad's old guard, the people who'd watched me grow up, who'd later dismissed me as the daughter who couldn't hack it in the family business. Marcus stood at the head of the table practicing his speech. Mom sat in the observers section, beaming with pride at her precious son. Dad was at his usual place, gathering papers for his last meeting as CEO. "Rachel." Dad frowned as I entered. "This is a closed meeting. How did you?" "She's the Reynolds representative," Karen announced from the doorway, still looking shocked. The room went silent. Marcus dropped his index cards. "Reynolds." Mom stood up. "The company that's been buying our shares." I took my seat at the table, enjoying the growing panic in Marcus's eyes. Over the past year, Reynolds Global had been quietly acquiring Mitchell & Sons stock, staying just under the reporting threshold. No one had bothered to investigate who owned Reynolds Global. "Impossible," Marcus sputtered. "Reynolds Global is a multi-billion-dollar company. You work in some tiny..." "Actually," I opened my briefcase, "I founded Reynolds Global 8 years ago, right after I left Mitchell & Sons. Named it after Grandma Reynolds. You know, the one who always told me I could do anything while you all said I was dreaming too big." Dad's face had gone pale. But the acquisition is complete as of this morning," I finished, sliding the documents across the table. "Reynolds Global now owns 51% of Mitchell & Sons. And as CEO of the parent company, I'm here to announce some changes." Marcus lunged for the papers, his hands shaking as he read. "This can't be legal. Dad, do something." But Dad was staring at the documents with growing horror. He'd been so busy grooming Marcus as his successor, he'd missed the signs of a hostile takeover right under his nose. 8 years, I continued, standing up to address the board. 8 years of building something while you all mocked my failed career. 8 years of watching Marcus nearly destroy our European markets while Dad covered for his mistakes. 8 years of planning this exact moment. Mom tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. As the new majority shareholder, my first act will be to restructure the executive team. Dad, you can keep your board seat. Your experience is valuable. But Marcus. My brother's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. Marcus will be stepping down from all executive positions, effective immediately. His severance package is generous, considering the $30 million loss he hid from the board last quarter. "How did you?" Marcus choked. "I do my homework, brother. Something you never learned to do. Did you really think nobody would notice the creative accounting in the European division?" The board members were whispering now, papers rustling as they reviewed the documents I'd provided. Detailed reports of Marcus's mismanagement, the hidden losses, the covered-up mistakes. "This is outrageous." Mom stood up. You can't just walk in here and... Actually, I can. And I have. Mitchell and Sons is now a subsidiary of Reynolds Global Ventures. And its new CEO, I smiled, savoring the moment, is sitting right here. The next hour was a masterclass in corporate restructuring. I presented Reynolds Global's plan for Mitchell and Sons, complete modernization of operations, expansion into emerging markets, and most importantly, a thorough audit of all divisions, especially Marcus's pet projects. You'll destroy everything Dad built. Marcus shouted, his perfectly tailored suit now wrinkled from his agitation. No, brother. I'm saving what Dad built from what you nearly destroyed. I projected the real numbers onto the boardroom screen. Would anyone like to explain why the European division's losses were classified as temporary market adjustments? The board members shifted uncomfortably. They'd all known about Marcus's creative accounting, but no one had dared question Dad's golden boy. Or perhaps, I continued, pulling up another document, someone would like to explain the shell company in Luxembourg that's been bleeding company funds for the past 3 years? Marcus went pale. That had been his secret. A private account where he'd been funneling company money to cover his gambling debts and lavish lifestyle. That's confidential information, he sputtered. Nothing is confidential from the majority shareholder, Marcus. Did you really think I wouldn't find your little piggy bank? Dad finally found his voice. Rachel, please. We can discuss this privately. Like you discussed giving Marcus control of the European division privately? Or how you privately decided to make him CEO despite his complete lack of qualifications. I pulled up more documents, years of meticulous research and evidence gathering. While you were grooming Marcus for leadership, I was learning every aspect of this business. I started in the mailroom of Reynolds Global, worked my way up through every department. Can Marcus even name all our subsidiary companies? My brother's blank stare answered that question. Mr. Mitchell, one of the board members, spoke up. These numbers, they're worse than we thought. The European losses alone are manageable, I interjected, with proper leadership and accountability. Reynolds Global has the resources and expertise to turn things around. Unless, of course, the board would prefer to explain to the shareholders how they allowed this level of mismanagement. The threat was clear. Either accept the new leadership, or face the consequences of their complicity in Marcus's schemes. Mom tried a different approach. Rachel, honey, you've made your point. But surely we can work something out. Keep this in the family. This stopped being about family the day you all dismissed my potential because I wanted to learn the business from the ground up instead of starting in the executive suite. I clicked to the next slide. My strategic plan for the company's future. Reynolds Global didn't succeed by playing family favorites. We succeeded through innovation, merit-based advancement, and absolute transparency. The board members were leaning forward now, their expressions shifting from shock to interest as they saw the potential in my proposals. Mitchell and Sons has been running on reputation and outdated practices for too long, I continued. It's time for real leadership, not nepotism. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm calling our lawyers. Already done, I smiled. They've reviewed everything. The acquisition is legal, the evidence of your mismanagement is documented, and your executive access has already been revoked. Check your phone, your email account has been suspended. He frantically pulled out his phone, face reddening as he saw the lockout message. You can't do this to me, he shouted. Dad, tell her she can't do this. But Dad sat silent, finally seeing what he'd refused to acknowledge for years. That his son, his chosen successor, had nearly destroyed everything he'd built, while his daughter, the one he'd overlooked, had built something even greater. Security will escort you to your office, I said calmly. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. Everything else will be reviewed as part of the audit. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the doorway. I'd hired them myself. No chance of loyalty to the old regime. This isn't over, Marcus threatened as they let him out. Actually, it is. Oh, and Marcus, the Range Rover in your parking spot? That's company property. Your new transportation options are in your severance package. The weeks following the takeover were intense. Audit teams descended on every division, uncovering years of mismanagement and hidden losses. Marcus's European empire was worse than even I had suspected, Nearly $50 million in concealed debts, questionable contracts and luxurious business expenses. Mom tried emotional manipulation first. She showed up at my new office, Dad's old corner suite, with tears and guilt trips ready. "How could you do this to your brother?" she demanded. "He's devastated. His wife is threatening divorce now that the truth about their finances is out." I continued reviewing audit reports without looking up. "Interesting how you're more concerned about his marriage than the hundreds of employees whose jobs he endangered with his incompetence." "He made mistakes, but..." "Mistakes?" I finally looked at her. "Let me show you some mistakes." I pulled up the forensic accounting reports on my screen. 5-star hotels for business meetings that never happened. Private jet rentals for client consultations that were actually gambling trips to Monaco. An entire floor of London office space leased to a shell company he owned personally. Her face paled as she read the numbers. He wouldn't. He did. And you and Dad enabled it. Every time you dismissed concerns about his leadership, every time you covered up his failures, you put this company, and its employees, at risk. But he's family. So are the thousands of people who depend on this company for their livelihoods. The single mothers in accounting, the fathers in shipping, the families that would have been destroyed if Marcus had been allowed to run this company into the ground. Security called up. Marcus was in the lobby demanding entrance. I watched on the camera feed as he ranted, his once immaculate appearance now disheveled. The gambling debts he'd been hiding had come due, and without access to company funds, he was facing some very unhappy creditors. "I'll handle this," I told security, heading down to the lobby. Marcus looked up as the elevator opened. He snarled. "You've ruined everything." "No, Marcus. You ruined everything. I'm just cleaning up your mess." I gestured to the security guards. "My brother appears to be trespassing. You can't do this to me. I'm a Mitchell." "So am I. The difference is I earned my position instead of having it handed to me." As security escorted him out, I caught Dad watching from the mezzanine. He'd been quiet since the takeover, showing up for board meetings but barely speaking. Today, though, he looked different. "Got a minute?" he asked as I passed. We went up to my office, his old office. The changes I'd made were symbolic. Replacing the old oil paintings of great men with photographs of employees, adding a wall of monitors showing real-time company operations worldwide. "I was wrong," he said quietly, looking around the transformed space. "About everything." "Yes, you were." The European division reports. I knew Marcus was struggling, but I had no idea. "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "Just like you didn't want to know what I was building at Reynolds Global. It was easier to dismiss me as a failure than admit your chosen successor was the real failure." He picked up a framed photo from my desk me at my college graduation, when I'd announced I was taking an entry-level position instead of the executive role he'd offered. "You said you needed to learn the business from the ground up," he remembered. "I thought you were afraid of responsibility." "No, Dad. I was afraid of becoming Marcus. Someone who had power without understanding, authority without experience." I showed him the latest company reports. Under Reynolds Global's management, Mitchell & Sons was already showing signs of recovery. The transparent accounting practices I'd implemented had restored investor confidence. Employee morale was up now that advancement was based on merit rather than connections. "The board is impressed," he admitted. "Your strategic plan, it's better than anything Marcus or I ever developed. Because I understand every aspect of this business. While Marcus was playing executive, I was learning operations, finance, logistics, everything it takes to actually run a company." A notification popped up on my screen. The Paris office reporting another hidden account of Marcus's. The losses were adding up. "He'll need to be prosecuted," Dad said quietly. "Yes. The board has already approved legal action. He betrayed not just the family, but everyone who trusted him with their livelihoods." Dad stood slowly, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I failed as a father," he said. "I pushed the wrong child away and promoted the wrong child forward." "You did," I agreed. "But Mitchell & Sons won't fail. I won't let it." He nodded, heading for the door. Then he paused. "That tiny office downtown, it was never really tiny, was it?" "No. It was just one piece of what I was building while you weren't watching." After he left, I stood at the window looking out over the city. 8 years of planning, learning, and building had led to this moment. The company my grandfather had founded, that my father had grown, and that my brother had nearly destroyed, was now secure in my hands. My phone buzzed. Mom again, probably with another emotional plea for Marcus. I silenced it and turned back to my work. There was a company to run, employees to protect, and a legacy to rebuild. The nameplate on my desk caught the afternoon sun. Rachel Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. Below it, a smaller line that my family had never bothered to read on my business card. Founder and CEO, Reynolds Global Ventures. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success they never saw coming until it was too late to stop it. 1 year later, Mitchell & Sons had transformed under Reynolds Global's leadership. The European division was not only stable but thriving. Employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and our stock price had doubled. Marcus? He eventually faced charges for financial fraud. The court was unsympathetic to his claims of family betrayal. Last I heard, he was serving 5 years in a minimum security prison, writing a memoir about being stabbed in the back by his sister. Mom finally stopped calling after the sentencing. She couldn't reconcile her image of her perfect son with the reality of his crimes. Dad, surprisingly, found a new role as a mentor to young executives in our management training program, teaching them what not to do as a leader. As for me, I kept building, growing, and proving that success isn't about who you're born to be, but who you choose to become. The tiny office downtown is now Reynolds Global's newest tech hub, developing innovations that will carry both companies into the future. Sometimes at night I still visit that old office. It reminds me of where I started and how far I've come. The view might not be as impressive as my current corner office, but it represents something more valuable. The proof that sometimes the best success stories start in the places others dismiss as insignificant. After all, it's not about where you start. It's about where you're smart enough to finish.